So I'm going to be honest with you guys, I actually made this video a couple days before the draft when the Karl Towns reports and rumors were coming out that Minnesota could of course be trading him. Since then, there's been a lot of different conflicting reports that Minnesota might actually want to keep what they have right now, but then other reports are saying that they could still be on the lookout to trying to trade a player like Karl Towns if the deal is right. Again, we know that Portland as well did just draft Scoot Henderson, who would also be a very fitting player in the Minnesota Timberwolves if they were looking to potentially make a trade. Again, there's a lot of ifs and buts, but I still thought this video was good enough to release out there, because again, there is still quite a bit of a chance that Portland do decide to make some changes, and I think Karl Towns will definitely be on their radar. And yeah, I just think if you hear me say they might be taking Brandon Miller, just know now, of course, this was made a couple of days before the draft, and yes, they ended up taking Scoot Henderson, which again was somewhat of a shock to me. I didn't know where the Hornets were going to go on this draft, and yeah, so just if you could please keep that in mind. But I guess without further ado, here is the Karl Towns to Portland Trailblazers rumors. So there's a trade going around right now that I actually think is incredibly good for potentially both parties involved in this. And this is the current report that the Portland Trailblazers are actually interested in trading the 3rd overall pick for Karl Towns. Now, again, in my honest opinion, before I get into why I think Cat would actually be a pretty good addition to this Trailblazers team, I would just like to start off by saying, no, I don't think Portland should trade this pick. I think they should go back and select a player with the 3rd overall pick, preferably Brandon Miller. If you get Scoot Henderson, then I don't think Scoot Henderson and Dame would be the best duo. I have already said I don't really like that at all, and I think you would rather do something different than that. But if they can get Brandon Miller with this pick, I think Brandon Miller is kind of that in a forward that they've kind of been screaming for quite a bit now. Again, they brought in Jeremy Grant to be that guy, but he didn't fulfill, I think, what they wanted him to. And look, Jeremy Grant has to completely, I think, rethink his whole career, because I think he was wanting to go into this off season as like the clear number 2 option on Portland, averaging like 22 a game, probably going to be wanting the max extension, but we know that didn't end up happening at all. In fact, there were games where this dude was like the 4th option on this team, and I don't know, I just think that's where Jeremy Grant's career is trending. I don't necessarily think he's a bad fit on Portland, I just think that's what he should be as a player, and I don't think that's a bad thing at all. And I think if I was Jeremy Grant, I'd be looking to take a nice deal of around 20 to 25 million a year, rather than looking for that $35 million per year contract, because you're definitely not going to get it. I think Brandon Miller and Jeremy Grant would be a really good duo as well on, as their forwards. But the thing is, I think if they're going to trade the 3rd overall pick for anybody, I think trading it to the Minnesota Timberwolves would make a whole lot of sense, especially to bring in Karl Towns. And I genuinely believe this deal is an extremely good win-win deal. I've heard that right now teams expect that Cat's worth is pick 3 and nothing more, but I've heard, there would have to be, salary matches and all of that type of stuff. So realistically, I think if this deal was to probably happen as well, I think Anthony Simons would probably get thrown into it, which I still think is also a good move for Portland. That way, if you trade Simons, who, don't get me wrong, was a really, really good player, I think if you trade Anthony Simons away, you give Shaedon Sharpe that starting spot next year, and I think that makes a whole lot of sense, considering Shaedon Sharpe was also a pick number 7 who really hasn't had the opportunity to do what he probably should have been able to do. So realistically, I think if you were to trade like pick 3 and Anthony Simons, right? So pick 3 obviously for Cat, Anthony Simons is to somewhat match up the contracts, but you were to maybe ask for a later pick in return, for Simons, and maybe a nice role player here and there, like a Kyle Anderson. I think that's actually a really good move for both teams. Again, the straight swap of pick 3 for Cat makes sense, but obviously with the contracts and whatnot, I think Simons is on around 25 million, which is very close to matching up with Cat. Again, still taking on Karl Anderson. I don't think he's on more than 7 or so. So again, it still wouldn't be that far from matching up. There's going to be a lot of different things that need to be done, I think, match up the salaries on this contract. But the way I look at it is Portland have a lot of money to spend in free agency anyway. So I don't think it's going to be on their end that's going to be hard to match up the contracts. It's going to be more on the Minnesota Timberwolves end. And I think for Minnesota, this is a great move because Karl-Anthony Towns is a really solid player. But now that you've got Rudy Gobert and you're paying him so much money, we know Cat is kind of hindering what Gobert does on the court, and Gobert is hindering what Cat does on the court. They just didn't work out as a duo. And I think if you're Minnesota and if you can bring in like Anthony Simons and like a Brandon Miller out of this trade, that would be really, really interesting. Like, I think that starting 5 of having like Conley at the point guard position, Simons at the 2, Edwards at the 3, maybe McDaniels at the 4, and Gobert at the 5. Look, you're pretty small 1 through 4, but that's actually a really, really good, evenly spread out team that can all space the floor. And I don't know, something about that would be really awesome. Just seeing Anthony Edwards now finally get to be the number 1 guy on this team. He doesn't have to worry about playing behind Cat. Gobert as well can go back to doing what Gobert, I feel like people have forgot what Gobert is able to do, and that's be one of the best defenders in the game and still be pretty decent in the paint. And then again, Mike Conley is still a really underrated point guard. Simons is going to be a 20 point per game type scorer. You're not going to lose that much defense at all either, because I think McDaniels would probably be able to guard the 4 almost better than Cat at this rate. And you look at it like this. Look, Simons is... You'd probably rather Simons defend the 1, but Conley's a great defender at the 1. We know Edwards is a great defender at the 2 or 3. It's going to make a lot of sense if you're Minnesota to make this move. And I think for Portland, again, if you're going to do anything, this kind of makes sense, I think, for Portland. Again, you would move on from Anthony Simons, which would somewhat suck. But at the end of the day, you're going to make, I think, Shaedon Sharpe a 3-time better player than what he is now. You could see Shaedon Sharpe going from his 10 point per game average to like 16, I think. That's how much I think he could make that jump. Plus, I think he's going to be a better defender and better player to have with Damian Lillard at that too. Then again, you bring in Cat, who solves a lot of problems on this team. You can shop around Nurkic to try and bring in some forwards as well. I just think that makes a whole lot of sense. Cat also just relieves so much pressure off Damian Lillard to have just another scorer on this team. Plus, you still got Jeremy Grant there as that 4, who would go very nice with Karl-Anthony Towns, I think. I think this is a really good trade that makes sense for both teams, and I genuinely feel like something like this could potentially happen. But of course, I would very much like to hear all of your thoughts and opinions on this down below. Do you guys think the Minnesota Timberwolves should, of course, try and trade for the 3rd overall pick? Do you guys think that, you know, could the Trailblazers maybe make something like this happen? Definitely let me know all of your thoughts and opinions. And even, I didn't even mention this earlier, but like Brandon Miller now. Brandon Miller, if he was to be drafted by that Minnesota team, look, you could even have ways where maybe if you have Simons at the 1, Edwards at the 2, Miller at the 3, and you bring Conley off the bench for the playmaking. Something like that. There's a lot of opportunities that can be genuinely explored here, and I would be very interested to see if something like this goes down. My opinion though, Portland should keep pick 3 and potentially just select Brandon Miller. But of course, if you haven't already, again, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Comment your thoughts and opinions on this down below. I would very much like to know if you guys think this trade could work and what would be the, you know, things that happen in it. I would like to know, like, what's your guys' mock trade. Also, subscribe to my gaming channel, my IRL/vlogging channel. All of them will be getting linked in the description down below. But as I was saying, please make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and comment. And I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.